Welcome students of BA Part 1 English Literature. In our last class, we had started with another essay by Hilaire Belloc, a British writer who has written this essay on an educational reform, which I mentioned in the initial class that how this essay, the tone of this essay is satirical, and by commenting on the growing fraud, deceit, uh, cheating in the society, the writer wants to draw our attention to the growing problem of the subject of fraud in our society, and how our children, if they remain ignorant to the world which they will enter into after their school and the college, how they will have to uh, understand the difficulties because of the rampant or the growing uh, tendency of people to cheat others. So, in this chapter, he had talked about the different aspects of the subject of fraud. And in the next page, he continues to describe in detail that how people use these fraud as a way to gamble and to deceive others to gain money quickly. So, here towards the uh, third paragraph, we find that the writer talks about another master gate to fortune. Master gate, an entry point, chief entry point to fortune is the abuse of confidence. You persuade men to untrust you. Persuade, you convince them by your language and the words which you use to entrust you with money. Entrust so that they are ready to give away their money for one purpose and then use it secretly for very different end purpose. So there are people in society who would like to get great fortune by use of the confidence which they will display while they are trying to persuade other people to give them money as an investment, which they will say they would put it in a company which will give them lot of benefit. But then what they are going to do about that money, the person who is lending would not know, who's investing would not know. And if you bring off the deal, it is your gain. If you drop the money, the loss is there. So what he's talking about is relevant in today's world when we talk about the stock exchange or the share market, where people invest in companies, or they, because they want to earn money, if the shares go up in price they would gain money. So this is how he's referring to this aspect of making fortune. And he then talks about another royal road is merger, another false description, another plain straightforward theft. So he's in a satirical way talking about the different means which the people who uh, conduct themselves in this subject of fraud, what kind of different ways they would use in order to bluff others. All these repose on a sound talent in fraud, and in general, so it is in all forms of fortune getting, save in the highly specialized craft or mystery of blackmail. Upon cheating, all honor and therefore all happiness depends. Upon cheating, all honor and therefore all happiness depends. It is wealth so made which, save for those who inherit wealth and who are securely tied up as well, determines the position of a man today among his fellows. So actually, this is a irony that we honor and respect people who have gained money and they have become powerful and famous with that accumulation of great wealth. But the way they have done that may be through a very wrong way. So the writer is trying to point out about the people who use all kinds of deceitful acts to uh, gain money. Then he goes on to say that, well, what trace is there of this great truth in the curriculum of our schools? Then this is a rhetoric question mark, that is there any um, trace of this truth, that how people gain money in the syllabus of our students? It is entirely neglected. I admit that pomposity, which is a necessary element in all success, is indirectly taught. I admit still more freely and fully that the spirit of falsehood is taught as a sort of general subject, but I maintain that swindling, cheating as a particular subject is not taught at all, and even the most elementary forms of it, which every boy ought to be acquainted in his early teens, come upon him with a shock when he is already a young married man launched in life and, as the phrase goes, battling with the world. So here in this paragraph the writer wants to say that because in our schools or colleges we don't teach children about these frauds and cheating and swindling of money which happens in society, so the children, they go are launched into the world without any this knowledge, and they are shocked because in schools we teach about moral values and how we should follow the right path, but when they enter into the world they are shocked to see that how people earn money. This, I say, is a shameful neglect. Here is an instance, the most elementary form of swindling, that is cheating, that which is as it were the gambit of every operation, and that which is the sum total of all the simpler operations of commerce, consists in giving a verbal assurance which it is intended to repudiate later by document or action. So here he wants to say that he is giving an example. Here is an instance, an example, that the most basic elementary form of cheating, that is, that which is as it were the gambit. Gambit means calculated move, a strategy. What is the strategy of every operation? And that which is the sum total of all the simpler operations of commerce. Commerce here means business, consists in giving a verbal assurance which it is intended to repudiate, means reject, later by document or action. So here he says that the fraud happens when people would try to uh, convince you into paying the money or giving money for something, but later on they would not keep up with the promise which they have must have kept, and they would produce a document which would falsify uh, whatever they have said. You promise a man something which you do not intend to perform, or you give a false description which reality will later expose, bring the truth of the matter, or in some other way you use the psychology of affirmation to your advantage. So here he goes on to describe that you may promise someone something which you know in your heart that you do not will not fulfill, and you give a false description which later on in reality will show that it is untrue, and you use the psychology of affirmation. Psychology means the human behavior. Affirmation, where you say that something is, you are very sure of something. So you want to convince that person with your uh, confidence. Well, what could be simpler than to have a class, even if it were for about half an hour a week, where all boys over a certain age could be trained by example both to be upon their guard against the false affirmation of others, and what is more important, to make false but plausible, logical, reasonable affirmations themselves with all boldness which breeds success, to make affirmations particular affirmations emphatic, affirmations probable, affirmations flattering. So here he wants to say that you must be able to, you must be on your guard. On your guard means very attentive when you are listening to people who are trying to convince you to buy something or put your money into something. And you yourself should be so, because you know that people will try to convince us into something which is not right. So when you are making those affirmations, when you want to make others fool or you are cheating them, then your affirmations should be very logical, reasonable, and flattering. They should be able to convince the person in front of you to get into that trap. So, this is again an ironical way that this is what we should train our children. Even the negative side of this very necessary piece of training is omitted, and boys are not taught, at least in any school with which I have acquaintance, the importance of economy in falsehood. Economy in falsehood. Economy means to play safe with your words or money. Economy is that when we use the words properly and with uh, caution, when we don't waste money. So your words when you are using to convince others should not should not go waste. The immature mind, that means the mind of that young child, because when we are young we do not know how to deal with these situations. A mature person would be able to easily convince others. So the immature mind will of course tend to falsehood as a natural human instinct, but the force of kindly nature is here wasted because it lacks direction. Young men go out into the world lying freely about the grandeur of their acquaintance, their personal prowess. Prowess means here abilities, and the rest, all matters conducing in no way to the accumulation of wealth, which is the end of man. Now, what could be simpler than, in such a class as I suggest? I admit that half an hour a week rather short commons, but everything must have a beginning. What could be simpler than to give some direction, at least to the pseudological factor in the mind, and train it to the right end? Pseudological factor, false logic, a logical argument that purposefully omits an outcome so that a false conclusion is reached. So, in this whole page, the writer has tried to talk about that how the children in the schools are untrained about the falsehood which they will face soon in the society. So, we'll continue with the leftover pages. Till that time, you must finish reading it once again.